Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're here for the evening and you haven't been here before, welcome. This is still kind of an experimental evening that we're experimenting with who wants to come in the evening as opposed to the morning, which we do absolutely every day. So anyway, so we're trying to figure that out, and we're doing this here. Basically, the way it works is that you ask questions. There's a Mukana. If you're in YouTube, you can click on the little link. You'll get to Zoom. Click on the little link. You get to Mukana. You can ask questions. You can vote on those questions. You can chat with each other. And the best thing to do is just bring up the questions that are coming up for you in your everyday life around media and virtual events. If it's other things, it's probably not the right place to ask that question. But otherwise, we open the doors at 6:00, and at 6:30 we start. We'll do 6:30 to 8. Now, a reminder that we do this actually every day in the mornings. And of course, that starts at, we open the doors at 6 and the event starts at 7. And without further ado, Bill, what do we have lined up?
Let's dive into it. James Babbitt has our first question. Frequent questioner from San Diego. Please comment on quickly switching to Zoom on Twit on Sunday. How does the producer get a clean aperture?
So I didn't feel like with this was OBS Ninja. I didn't feel like we were getting as much bandwidth as I wanted to see. So I'm of course reviewing it on iStat menu, and I'm looking at it, and I have a certain expectation of what it should look like, and I wasn't seeing that. So both I felt that OBS Ninja was capping out at about 1.5 meg, which is what they have theirs set to. So I think that was partly on their end doing that. So then I increased it up to 4.5 megs a second, and still felt like it wasn't taking. And so anyway, so I decided I requested that we experiment with Zoom. We did have some issues with Zoom hitting kind of some kind of wall, for a little bit during that event. So I'm not sure exactly what happened there. But then after that, I think it got clearer, and it was actually clearer than the Skype connections that they had there by the middle or so. And so I think that it was pretty good with a 1080p account. I had them joining my account because I had a 1080p account and they don't. So it's using about 6.5 megs a second, which is roughly what Skype is using. So anyway, so that's what happened there. Again, there was some kind of Zoom storm or some kind of issue right at the or near the very beginning. So it looked perfect before the show, and then there was like a half an hour of it being messy, and then there was another. It wasn't the best sell to Leo, but then it kind of evened itself out again. So the reason that there was probably nothing there is that if you don't move anything, you don't see very much there other than the name, and they run it through a scaler, so they could easily scale it up. So they probably just scaled past any other interface that was present there. But overall, I think it definitely looked better than Skype. Skype was kind of it's been a little bit of a dumpster fire. So it has been for a while. Anyway, all right, next question.
Next question. Rick Coombs is questioning on the topic of Clubhouse. He tried to join Clubhouse on Wednesday night, could not get on because apparently did not have an invitation. How can I get an invitation to join? He asked.
Not have an invitation. I didn't know that I had to invite didn't have an invitation into the Clubhouse itself. Go ahead, John, and then Tony.
Just hit me up on Discord. There's several of us that have, or just ask in the Clubhouse sub chat in Discord, and we'll be happy to invite you.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of them kind of hanging out there. So go ahead, and it's kind of this weird invite where you have to put their number into your address book. It's horrible from a privacy perspective. It's a disaster. But yeah, that we've been kind of helping each other. So you can also always ping the Clubhouse category or channel in Discord. There's people that have spare invites that are kind of handing them out. So we're slowly getting everybody in. Anyway, next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia in Marin County, California, said, is it possible to provide remote support to a panelist during a Zoom webinar? And the note there, I guess this is only possible in a Zoom meeting.
Go, Jason.
Actually, webinar is what tripped me up. Of course, it's really easy in a meeting, and in a webinar, I don't think I've ever had to do it. So I don't know.
You can't do it. It's not possible. It's just a limitation. And I don't know whether that's, I mean, there's a variety of reasons that might not be something you'd want to do. A webinar is assuming you got a lot of people on the other end that are passively watching it. And I think that from a security perspective, you probably wouldn't want to take that on in the webinar. So I think that it's probably an understandable limitation of features. So I complain a lot about limitations in Zoom, but that's not one of them. Like, you could easily show URLs and passwords and all kinds of other stuff to a lot of people without really, you could do that in the meeting too, but I can see in a meeting where it might be one-on-one or something like that. But in a webinar, you could show it to a lot more people. Anyway, so that's probably what's going on there. Next question.
Rupert McCrae is up next from Dallas, Texas. What electrical safety tips does the panel have for a small remote studio environment other than basic surge and UPS protection? Thanks, everyone.
If you get past basic surge and UPS protection, you should hire a professional. I like that. That's my number one thing is just be careful. It's enough voltage to kill people, and you just want to keep that in mind. Jason and then Joshua.
Okay. First, basic surge and UPS are great. And what matters more than that, especially if you're running a studio, is that you need a voltage conditioner. You need something that's making sure that you're actually getting truly alternating current that alternates in a predictable fashion in a sine wave. Anything other than that, and you can end up getting a lot of noise. Also, go get a ground checker. Be sure all of your outlets are actually grounded. Just because they have 3 prongs doesn't mean that they are actually grounded. So those are the 2 things you can do without having to hire anybody.
Go ahead, Joshua, and then Bill, and then George.
From a purely protection standpoint, keep lockouts handy and lock down a fuse or breaker or whatever's on the other end of what you're working on, because you don't want to trip something, especially with your hand right there.
Go ahead, Bill.
Having built a pocket studio and insert stage in a hay barn once upon a time, spent months and months, the biggest hassle that we had was twofold. Electrical for the air conditioning because we had to have a split unit to keep the sound down. The other thing that was constantly going on was just making sure the ground loops aren't an issue. So depending on how much power you draw in the studio, and it's gotten better because we used to have to use a lot of incandescent lights that required huge amounts of power. That's getting better and better. But you just want to make sure that if you run into ground loops and things like that, you understand phases of your electric and how to attack those, because audio is really more difficult usually in a small studio space than is the video.
Go ahead, George.
Once you get to this point where you're doing a lot of this stuff from home, it's a little more expensive, but mid-Atlantic strips, and just mount them to under your desk or on your desk, but definitely keep power strips off the floor, especially if your office is carpeted.
Yeah. One of the other things to think about is beyond just having a UPS is really knowing how much how much the UPS is drawing and how much you're drawing from your circuits. So one big thing is if the circuits aren't already, if your circuits aren't already identified as, if you want to know what outlets are on what circuit. So one of the things you can do is you can put there's a little loop that you can put into your circuit, and then you can literally go over to your breaker box, which you also want to know where it is. Like especially if you're in a business, like a building that's shared, you want the breaker to my office turns out to be in somebody else's office in the far corner. So it took me a little while the first time I blew it to figure out what had happened. So anyway, you want to know what the circuits are that are going around, and mark them. Like just mark which circuits they're on. That's really important to know. It's much easier than spread out the load if you know what those things are. The second thing is that I believe that generally I shoot for 40-50% impact, 60% at the top of load on the UPS. So you just want to make sure that you have plenty of headroom on that UPS, and actually test it, unplug it, let it run out. Like how much time do you actually have on that with everything running? How much time do you actually have on that? Because I usually want 20 minutes. That's usually where I can't get that all the time with some of the equipment that we have, but I always want to have, you want it obviously at least 5, to be able to turn everything off. But I'm shooting for enough that, if it's something that just get knocked out or whatever, it'll get returned. And then for us, on big events, we have generators. And so what we want is enough time that we can very comfortably switch to the generators and then flip back over. And it is, UPSs do make you, I mean, in small studios, just you feel good on your own. When on a big event, when the whole half the building turns off and all your lights are still on, it's a good feeling. I think that Sherman and I have both been in an event like that. Jason and then Bill. We had a cup of tea.
The last time I answered this question on the panel, I added one other thing. There's a device called a kilowatt, KILLAWATT, and what it is an inline voltage and amperage meter. It also has a little bit of memory in it, so it will actually, over time, it'll tell you, the average, the number of watt hours. You can reset it to, you can get a peak. It is a perfect little device. They're inexpensive, and I'll put a link in Mukana.
Go ahead, Bill.
And if you're running power around any kind of a shooting set, just make sure that you're absolutely scrupulous about taping and or covering over power cables and things like that along the floor. If you can, I've always tried to get them up in the ceiling or somewhere where people don't have to deal with them. Not only are they a tripping hazard, but if somebody spills a drink right next to a extension cord or something like that, it can be really ugly.
Okay. We're going to go pretty fast now because we've really nailed this one into the ground. Michael and then John and then TJ.
Yeah, if you like a kilowatt, if many smart power outlets give you similar functionality, and you may already have them that will monitor the energy. So they're great to deploy, even if you don't need the smart functionality for a few weeks, to give you that tracking in the app that they have. And I've used that a few times.
Yep, go ahead, John Edelson and then TJ.
This is a halogen fire extinguisher. We talked emergency. And if you've ever had an audio board that had an old style water fire extinguisher, put out a little fire that was in the backs of the audio board, you'll like this one. It doesn't destroy the board.
Nice. TJ.
You had mentioned a way of testing what outlet is on what circuit. I can't remember the name of the device, but electricians all have these thing where you plug it in and it makes this little tone, and there's another thing you just go over and touch the wire and you can tell what the circuit is. I can't remember the name, but
it's a probe. It's a circuit probe that you go to the circuit breakers, and I kind of touched over it, but yeah, you put it in the outlet and you go to the circuit breaker. All right, next question.
Okay, moving on. Guy Cochran of Seattle, our friend who's here most days with us. Besides using a Raspberry Pi as a hyperdeck, what are some other uses in the video production world?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I run Companion very happily on a Raspberry Pi, and it works beautifully.
Okay, go ahead, Sherman.
Yeah, you can also run OBS on there and send feeds via RTMP or web streams and stuff like that.
OBS runs on a Raspberry Pi?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Probably better than it does on Mac.
Yeah, so I've got some things that we pre-configure, the YouTube stream link and everything, and I just send it out to a client and they can plug it in just with the PoE Ethernet in their space, and then they have a simple web interface to hit stream.
Wow. I have never imagined using. And is it what resolution is it streaming to?
We do 720 for this one, just based on what they're using and everything like that, but it's using one of the Raspberry Pi HQ cameras, so it's coming in 1080 but then down to 720, and it runs pretty well. And as far as just program and send it to a client, that's the easiest thing for these guys. Right.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, you can also use it as a build your own streaming bridge. So you can if you run, there's a couple different apps. Aaron Parecki has a few good tutorials on YouTube, but you essentially set up to accept an RTMP stream, output over HDMI, and you've got a streaming bridge that works with just about anything.
Interesting. Go ahead, Joshua.
I don't use vMix every day, so I forget what they call it, but like the directory or announce server for finding the remote clients, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Go ahead, David.
And there's also a restreamer you can build out for your own Raspberry Pi. Quick and easy.
Nice. Next question.
Michael Ball of San Francisco says, on Big Sur, is there any way to get DeckLink or Ultra Studio devices show up in QuickTime for capture? Other apps all work as expected. Just curious about QuickTime.
I don't know if I have tried that on QuickTime yet. I've done a lot of different things, but I haven't. Yeah. Anyone else tried that with Big Sur? I mean, because that would be an exterior card, right? So it's not really a DeckLink card.
Well, it's a DeckLink card, and I have a Mac Pro, so it is a PCIe
Mhm.
card. But also the Ultra Studio, the mini recorder doesn't show up in QuickTime anymore. But they did show up fine in Catalina, and they show up, fine in Zoom and Chrome and anything else.
Sounds like a driver. I mean, like something just isn't done yet.
It's not a driver, it's a kext. You have to go into safe mode and you have to allow the loading of third party. And if that doesn't work, then I would call Black Magic because it should.
Yeah. I might have to try that. I have all the pieces at the office, so I'll see if I can get a hold of that. Yep. Next question.
And Michael Ball is right back with another one from here on the panel in San Francisco. Once you've got 1080p enabled on a Zoom account, has anybody seen if there's a number of participants when it caps out? Also, can transferring the host permission enable 1080p if the original host doesn't have 1080p?
Well, I think it has to be sourced. It has to be sourced from your account. So I think that's the big thing, is that the 1080p is connected to the actual overall account, not to the specific user. So I don't think you'd be able to transfer that ability to anyone else. I also don't think that I think 1080p is a very unusual thing, and I don't think there's any limit to how many people see it. We haven't pushed it hard enough. I think we've gotten up to 200, 220, something like that in Zoom, watching it without any change in that. But I don't. Yeah, you were gonna say, Michael?
So depending on your account setup, there are per user flags where under like the group HD videos thing, and those can be enabled and disabled for different users.
Right.
So like I have it on my account, but a lot of people I work with don't. But I haven't been able to figure out the numbers, but I do feel like when I've been teaching class and the 1080p function is enabled, when I get above 50 or 60, it starts to revert back to 720p. But it doesn't seem super consistent.
Right. Interesting. I don't know. And by the way, I think we're going to have time right now. We're a little low on questions. Sherman, if you have anything you want to show with Universe, given that you just finished probably demoing some Universe, we might come at you. I just wanted to give you a warning. You don't have to do it right now, but might want to think about it. I mean, you're here. I just want to take advantage of the fact that you're here. We're here. We love Universe. So a little preview would be.
Yeah, happy to do that. I'll queue up a few things here since I just came from AV Tech Talks doing that.
I figured you got it all pretty close to the surface, so it wouldn't be a huge lift.
I've got a few things to show and everything here. So.
Okay, cool. So we'll come to you in about 15 minutes. Next question
is our panelist friend George Kennedy here from Washington, D.C. Alex, I've been thinking about the comment this morning about vMix and the ATEM being the two systems to watch for virtuals. Can you expand a little on what you meant?
Well, I think that I just think that the bulk of the market is going to be it's not so much virtuals themselves, but everything. I think the bulk of the market is going to go between, outside of the trucks and the big broadcast studios. Those are all going to stay where they're at. They're going to be using, Carbonites and Sonys and Grass Valleys and, and then, but in this, what I think really is the next generation of broadcasters, I think that a lot of, which is probably 95% of the market. I think that there's a real duking out between those two things across most of the platforms. I think that on the Mac side, I think that you could see, Mimo Live, is another one of those ones that's a player. But I think that there's on the PC side, there's a lot of people using that, and I think that vMix is, and again, vMix and on the software side is probably the leader as far as center of mass and where it could go. And then I think on hardware, the ATEM switchers are going to be hard to beat. Not because right now that they're huge, but when you think about the number of ATEM minis that were shipped and the number that we're now buying of the extremes, when someone buys into an ecosystem, it's pretty hard to get them out of it. When they get to know it, they start buying cameras for it. They start buying other things for it. They get things integrated. They start taking it in automation. And I don't know what the numbers are for Blackmagic, but I'm going to bet that they were more than 100,000. And the thing is that's in the editing world, in like a live switching world, that is a big number, like a really big number. And so I think that the thing is that you're looking at a whole bunch of people that are probably going to buy a bigger version, like a lot of us are buying the Extremes, and then we'll buy the Extreme Pro, and then we'll buy the whatever they call it next, and the Extreme or the Final Extreme or whatever they, the Final Countdown, So, but the point is that I think that it's going to be hard to get people that go into that ecosystem to get them back out of the ecosystem. And I think that that's going to be the thing that's really interesting. So I think that, again, I'm not expecting the high end market to change what they're doing anytime soon, but I do expect this kind of more fluid market. And I think this market is the future. Like, I think that we're going to see many, many, many events that are under 50,000 viewers, like, blowing up. And then those companies growing into, and those organizations and those communities growing into something bigger. I don't think that the generalized kind of middle of the road content that's designed for millions of people to watch, I just don't think that that's competitive. Like the low millions, so there's just a lot of networks that are happy with 100,000 or 200,000 viewers. It's kind of like, it's the fishing stuff. There's the 500 channels and nothing to watch. But their business model is based around hundreds of thousands of viewers. In broadcasts, 5 million and above is what they're looking for. In large cable, 2 or 3 million and above. Those, I think, have some legs, but it's this mass, like the 400 of the channels are less than 1 million viewers per show. That stuff I don't think is competitive with what I would consider passion programming, where people were really interested, like what we're doing here. This could grow to, I don't think this would grow more than, 3,000 to 5,000 people watching at a time, which would be big. Like it would be, like we would be the most influential group in our industry if we were that big. But that's the point. There can be thousands of us in thousands of different verticals that are all that big. And I think these tools are the things that make that happen. Go ahead, George.
So you just hit on it again when you mentioned verticals. And for those of us that I want to say that the cloud is AWS is a great experiment. I mean, I'm on the lower end of things, and AWS just approved me for like 500 instances, which I don't know why. I didn't need that much, but they are watching and they're seeing that when you ask for that kind of limit, you have to send a use case. So they're paying attention. If we don't know it, they're paying attention to Guy's request, my request, so they know what's going on. Absolutely, vMix is taking off. It's going to take off in the cloud next, and the ATM constellation was purpose built for a big, for the Olympics, but we're going to see something that's going to come in between the extreme ISOs and the constellation. And, we don't know where Blackmagic is going next in between, but we just got to keep an eye and see where it goes. But it's a very interesting time right now.
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely living in interesting times. Hopefully it's good for us. I mean, I do feel like I've been talking to a couple of folks in the last couple of days, and I don't know if I mentioned it here, but I'm starting to feel like when it comes to virtual events that you kind of feel like you're in a house getting filled up with fumes, like natural gas, like we're just in this moment where all these pieces are coming together very fast, and it's just, it's getting ready to explode. And I think that it's going to get sparked by a couple big events. And it's probably someone in this group will probably be the one that, it'll be someone like you or someone like Sherman or Guy or Tucker or 1F Jeff or, Blue or Grant. I mean, there's probably 50-50 chance. It's one of us, someone in this group that is going to flip a switch and turn the whole thing, up. But what happens is when people really get what's possible, I think that there's going to be a huge demand for that. And that's, again, one of the reasons that I built this last year was because I really felt like it was coming and, and that we had to get a lot of people ready. But I think that, I do think it's going to be interesting, and I think that there's a big case for cloud, but there's also still things you still have to do physically, and there's things that I need to do. Like, for instance, I'm doing stuff that's 4K, high dynamic range, that kind of thing that doesn't lend itself to the cloud yet. It just doesn't work there. So I think that, but we're definitely looking at all those pieces. Next question.
TJ Asher's in from Minneapolis and here in the panel. And TJ says, suggestions on best or most effective way to record a Teams meeting on a Mac.
Yeah, go ahead, Joshua.
If it's a business Office 365 account, you can set it to roll straight to Microsoft Stream and download what I think looks a little better than Zoom's cloud record.
Go ahead, Bill.
I have to do that at least a couple of times a month for one of my larger clients, and I've actually been surprised. It started off pretty shaky, in my opinion, but this last couple of times I did it, and I did it about a week and a half ago. A simple QuickTime screen scrape did a really good job on a 16-inch MacBook Pro of getting me a really solid video signal. It is the interface is a little clunky if you're pinning, and when you pin, there's a little bit of delay. So if you have one person speaking and the other person starts speaking, it doesn't take it immediately. So it's less sophisticated than if you can have a bunch of sources that you're switching yourself, but it works. The only other thing you have to do then is just make sure you're using Loopback or something like that. And I'm obsessive about audio quality and these kind of things. So I'm usually doing 2 Loopback record instances, plus I'm attaching via XLR from the sound port out of my laptop into like a Zoom H4n just to make sure I've got an absolute for sure audio signal that I'm watching go to some external recorder.
Next question.
David Brady of New York says, in building out multifunction rooms, what are some of the best future-proofing technologies to consider? We're historically a copper shop, but I need to think beyond the BNC. Beyond the BNC, that's a lovely name for something.
Go ahead, George.
I mean, Cat 8 is readily available. If you want to look to the future and what we're going to do with NDI and so forth, Cat 8 is readily available.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Jason, and then Michael.
While we're at it, fiber is surprisingly cheap to run. I mean, I have to point that out because if I were to build anything right now, I would put fiber in every room and probably SDI in a lot of it, and almost certainly at least Cat 7.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of cabling, which is funny, that's where we all went. Just the biggest thing is rather than picking a cables, make it easy for you to rerun cables. So, especially if you have the ability to tear what's in between the walls, giving you places to run a snake through and rerun cable. But, whether that's fiber or Cat 7 or 8, I would also probably go for 8 at this point. And another thing is if you're putting in places, for patches or jacks, just plan for the ability to add more than you need. You might not need 3 or 4 inputs right now, but give yourself the function to run an additional cable or 2 in the future.
The hard part is we're kind of in that in-between stage where if you don't pick SDI, there's just a lot of stuff. There's a lot of, there's a lot of conversions and everything else. It's still not going to be, there's no clean way to do it. I mean, we all like the big facilities that are getting built right now are mostly getting built on 2110. But then on the other side of that 2110, they're all still got all these weird converters to get it to 2110. I don't see anyone, a lot of people's personal studios are getting built with, NDI and so on and so forth. But the heavy, we're actually building a studio that's going to do the thing is 2110, but again, it's still early. So not everything has all the things that you need to make it work. So that's a big challenge. I mean, when we talk to people in facilities, we're like, you can run whatever you want, but run TAC 12 to every room. Just a TAC 12 line to every room, because that solves all the connectivity for a long time. You'll probably won't be using that building the same way when the TAC 12 doesn't carry enough data between the rooms, and you can convert that back to Ethernet or to copper or to whatever you want. Go ahead, Tony, and then Jason.
I apologize for having to ask this question, but are you saying, or Jason, were you saying fiber and Cat 7 or 8? I think you and George both mentioned fiber and Cat 7 and 8. So are you saying that you should do both? I didn't understand.
Yes. And I mean, my point there was simply that if you're going to run one, running the other one is relatively inexpensive. Fiber is expensive to split and to route. It is not very expensive to buy. But I was reminded, Michael reminded me of one more thing. A client of mine is building a brand new building for a law firm, and I told him he doesn't have to do this everywhere, but especially in the conference room, run a cable conduit, just a couple of inches, and every studio does this. You can take the tiles out, and you've got a metal piece in the floor, do it along the floor, and do it up the wall. And that way you can just basically take a piece out, run the cables, and you're done. That the difference between that and any specific cable that you can run is going to be huge, because you don't know how this space is going to be used, and its marketability just went way up.
In the building that we're in the old ILM stage, so main stage, or 3210, which is the old what was called Building C. 40 years ago, someone decided to put raised floors with the ability to pull the floor up and run the cables. I would love to go back and buy that person a really good whiskey every time we have to run cables around the building, because everywhere in the whole building, you just pull up the floor and it's just a big cable trough below every single room. So it's just like you just run things around. Oh yeah, we'll just run that over here. We'll run that over there. We'll just put some new fiber in. It's maybe not every single room, but a great number of them, and it just makes everything easy. It's just something to think about. Go ahead, David, and then Michael.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we have at some of our locations is concrete floors where they have to pour it. So
yeah, that would be. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about protocols. I would also just call out planning for more power than you think you need is never a terrible idea, because that's another thing to go back and add.
I just love walking into rooms. We do a live stream out of a room that has one 20 amp circuit, and you're just like,
yeah,
I need to know where the other circuits are, and then you'll find out that circuit's like shared by like the next 3 rooms, and it was made for people who use laptops or something. I don't even know what that was made for.
You can never have enough power outlets, and definitely, the apartment that I'm in is only 4 years old, and they ran Cat 5e, and I can tell you right now that I do have a use for Cat 6 or 7, and so new buildings can age more quickly than you'd want just because you cheaped out a little bit on the cable.
And I find that infrastructure is kind of like bags. You just fill it up to whatever the size is. If you make these rooms really well connected, they'll tend to fill with better things. Like you'll just do more out of them because you can. Sherman, you got something to show?
Yeah, I could show something here. Is it better for you to spotlight this or for me to screen share?
I don't know. Or 1080p.
I can just switch to it if you want to spotlight.
Yeah, why don't you switch to it?
Or
it's
I can
fluid.
screen share.
Let's go ahead and switch, and then we'll just go ahead and spotlight it.
Okay. So this is a universe interface that I built. They just on Friday put out a new version, which has Zoom OSC, and pardon the NDI frame rate badness here. It's coming across the network this machine's giving me bad frame rate on NDI. So NDI is great, but not always the best. But anyways, what I have here is 2 NDI viewers of some BirdDog PTZ cameras that they just added protocol for on Friday. Got me real excited, and so I made a little interface for it. So you can select the camera you want to adjust. It turns on and off the commands being sent to that device, and so I can click on this one and pan this device around. I can control this slider here, which sets my zoom speed. So now it's scrolling at a slower speed, that's movement speed, and same with slider doing my zoom speed. I can switch to my other camera and control this one as well, and save and recall. So I mean, pretty basic interface there. I'll just go to the edit mode that I can show you kind of the back end of how that works. So this is the stage in universe, and so I have the NDI input that's bringing the 2 inputs here. Some logic that basically comes out of there of which device is selected, and then does testing logic of if 1 or 2 selected, turning on and off a device, and toggles these buttons. And then again, the fader here that's setting the zoom speed goes through a little bit of logic to take it from a % to a 0 to 14 value, and then saved as a variable. And then those variables are passed along to each of the command stacks for moving the cameras. So that's just a pretty basic.
And you
interface
can
there.
assign controllers to all of those movements, right? So you could kind of have
Correct.
your own. So you have those little sliders there, but you could really build a hardware controller that would then it could be a Stream Deck, but it could also be some kind of, there could be a variety of different controllers used, right?
Yep. So down in the lower right corner, I just realized I'm not sharing my mouse on this computer. That might be a little confusing. Show my mouse. There we go. Now a mouse. So basically Stream Deck here, I can just drag a button on here and get my up, down, and left and right commands onto the Stream Deck here. And you may be able to see that the Stream Deck's being populated with buttons. Not that great a view. But also one of the great things here is that this is actually NDI, live video NDI on my Stream Deck. That's coming across all these buttons here. So basically just drag and drop that onto the button you want. So to take this NDI, drag and drop it onto a button, and then say I want to span it across this many buttons. And I'll try to switch to that there on my interface there. But live video on a Stream Deck. Sorry, probably not the best way to show that, but I think you guys can see.
Coolest thing I've seen all week. That was great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one of the things in Universe is really great. Is just the way it controls Stream Decks is you have stages that have all your buttons, controls, and everything, and then those stages can be shared via web browser, or go full screen to an interface. And then you basically just right-click a button, drag and drop it onto your Stream Deck, and that button is there available. And they have pages that are similar to how many people on Companion would be used to pages. But the big difference there is you can actually have many Stream Decks connected up there, and they're each viewing and set with their own set of devices and controls. So I could have all the controls on my Stream Deck, but I could do like a Stream Deck Mini or just something and give that to another person, that I give them control of the 5 things that they need and nothing more.
Right. It's amazing.
Yeah. I guess if you want me to show the Zoom OSC integration, I could go and show that one next. So I'm not connected to Zoom OSC in this meeting here, but this is some pre-built data that is coming across here. So in Zoom OSC, originally when I showed this in the Zoom OSC class, I was just using the generic OSC patch for this. But since then, Zoom Universe has made a custom integration. So it actually has a list here that I can select a user. I can see if their video state, their mic state, and their hand raise state. And this little blue icon on the left here shows who's the active speaker. And so I'll go into show mode, so it's a little larger here. At the bottom here, I can actually search. So if I want to search for Patton, it'll come up with anything that searches for that little section. So if I search OSC, it comes up with that. But if I search Sherman, there's many names. So just click a name, sets the user variable here, and that user variable then goes to all of these buttons here as the variable for what user I want to take the action for. So if I want to spot, it takes this user, spots them, or unspots them. And that's where the node programming comes in. You can see all these green lines. Basically, it takes the output here, and I'll show you how you bind these. So I'll drag this to the unspot. Then it goes here and says, what parameter do you want to bind? I want to bind it to this user select. And do I want to do data or data and execution? I'm just going to do data only. And so that'll change that variable for all those buttons and set them as those states there for it. There's auto-built buttons that you can bring in here from Universe that will automatically do the toggle and set the name and give you some variables for feedback of their states. And that auto creates that when you're in a meeting. I'll just go to the device here. And if I was in a meeting, I could just do pull data and it would list everybody out here. And all I do to create those buttons is just say, I want a hand state and I want a grid of 8 rows. I can drop it in. And given there are only 4 users in this instance, but there's a button that automatically gives you information feedback and their name. If their name changes, it automatically titles it. Then just going on a little further here, since I'm right here, this is a little logic section here that basically I'm getting the output of the Zoom OSC is speaking state. It gives me some variables such as their name. Then I'm taking that, putting it to a little command here. So with this text module, so here's the command that I'm sending vMix, and that sets the label for a vMix title based on the is speaking state. And I have a similar thing here with hand raised, that if a user raises their hand, it pins them to screen 2 using Zoom OSC. And then this text does the same thing of telling vMix title number 24 to set to the name of that user that raised their hand. And then I've got a little hold logic here that basically when they raise their hand, it'll automatically pin and then put a gate there until I release that for the next user to actually raise their hand and be pinned.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that's,
I have a challenge.
There's a lot more, but that's just a little preview of it. And if anybody wants, they can go look at the AV Tech Talks on YouTube and see what we just did just a few hours ago. We had the Universe developers on there and went deeper than what you saw here, but many of the same topics covered.
Yeah, we're gonna talk to those guys about getting Sherman and the Universe guys and probably Andy on in a couple weeks. So so stay tuned for that. Do you know if you can integrate Universe with, I know this will sound crazy, Google Earth? The app,
well,
not the standalone app, not the web.
Well, let me put this that Peter is very open to feedback, and he's integrated probably. Peter's the dev of Universe. He's probably integrated about six or eight different devices between NDI, Spiders, Barco E2s, and things like that. So he would be open to it. But Universe actually has you can bring in NDI sources. You can do VNC sources with actual control going back out. So I could see if you were brought in, your Google Earth as a VNC source, it might be able to do what you're doing, but I'm not sure exactly what your
I have to look at the API
end use case.
Well, let's just say you had let's say that you had the information not only of the person's name but where they're from. And when they selected it, it could get to it by handing off the coordinates to Google Earth.
Yeah, so vMix has UDP, TCP, and web HTTP requests. So I could see that you could do a second machine that would be running your viewer. You would send the request to that viewer to another machine based on some logic in there. And again, the Universe logic is really great that you can build out some things pretty simply. If you need to go to a little more advanced, you can actually write Visual Basic or C# scripts and go way deeper. So I could see that being possible. But I think you could basically say, okay, I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, find a way to parse that SLC Utah or whatever, and send that out via request, and then bring that back in as a VNC or NDI resource as far as the viewing.
Right. Anyway, something to think about.
Plausible.
Yeah. Thanks, Sherman. Thanks for a little entertainment in the middle of there. That's cool, and that'll be a preview. We'll do a lot more Universe in the near future. I kind of want to do the same thing we did with Zoom OSC and what we're doing with Resolve right now, and get everybody into doing some Universe stuff together sometime in the near future. So
yeah, and just to put this out there, Universe is paid software, of course. Their free version, the way you test it, is you basically download the software and it will run for, currently, they've opened up a longer extension of this. It's normally 5 minutes, but with AV Tech Talks, they went to a 2-hour demo where you have full control of the pro version for 2 hours. And then after that, it stops sending and receiving commands, but you can keep building and making buttons and saving your interface. You just have to reboot the software to reopen up that command section. And also they put out a 20% discount code that's valid until Monday the 15th. So if you're thinking of buying it, get it before the 15th and save 20%.
Nice. All right. Next question.
Comes in from our panelist, John Pewitt, who says in Huntersville, can we all just take a minute and stand in awe of Doug Ferguson's setup? He's in the trailer.
Hanging out.
That was just the most amazing. Well, not the most amazing
that-
thing I've seen, but that's the most I've seen here.
Doug, are you in the, are you using a MarkerTech trailer?
It's a Hallmark trailer.
No, Hallmark trailer. And what's the length on it?
It's a 20-footer.
Mm-hmm.
So, see, I'm building macros for a show this weekend. So
yeah, it's interesting because ours was a 24-footer and we went lengthwise instead of widthwise, and it's interesting to see it widthwise. You know, it's cool.
I wish I had 24 because of all the storage bins with all the cables that no one told me that I needed to have to run this thing.
What we did for that is that we had a Ford, it's like a 350 dually that pulled the trailer, and then we built an entire. I'll see if I can find pictures of it. But we had them build in this entire enclosure inside of it, so all of our stuff went into there, so that we minimized the amount of stuff in the trailer. But it was an expensive thing to do, but it worked really well. Anyway, it looks great. Looks amazing.
No, I Chris Fenwick and I are planning something nice for you guys. We have something in the works.
Cool. Very cool. All right, next question.
Brett Ramsey of Melbourne, Australia says the latest version of vMix has been released, improved replay features and a new alert feature. Anybody had a look? And if so, are there any comments?
Go ahead, Sherman.
Yeah, I'm switching on it right now. What you're seeing, vMix 24. So yeah, it's working. The replay, I've been doing 4-camera replay tests on the machine right behind me here. It's working great. I haven't tested the 8, but the A and being able to actually use A and B on different timelines is opening up a huge amount of abilities, but I don't know if I have enough fingers and mental power to actually run 2 channels, but I'll see where I learn and get going with that. So I've got my gig actually in a couple weeks is a hill climb, snowmobile hill climb in Jackson, doing instant replay for. So I think I'll use 24, but I'm going to keep kicking the tires until I know and see if there's anything happening. But so far, no crashes, no major things on my end.
It's awesome. Next question.
Patrick Shonis of Little Rock, Arkansas says, what's the best approach for learning color correction and understanding video scopes? As an audio engineer who's making his living editing videos, thanks to the pandemic, I'm constantly learning new things. Aren't we all?
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, if you're going to learn DaVinci Resolve, Ripple Training really does have some pretty good stuff. Alex Van Herkman did their early stuff, and he is the brains. Well, I shouldn't say it, training brains from way back. I think you know him, right, Alex?
Oh yeah,
so
yeah.
Get him on office hours for us now.
Yeah, he's now at Frame.io, so he works on,
he is.
pipelines
Okay.
there. Yeah, he just moved over there, but yeah. So Alex is great. And definitely Alex has done some stuff you want to, I mean, we're going to get to a lot of that color stuff or color correction in 2 weeks, I think, but Jeff, definitely jump on the Resolve training that we're doing on Saturdays. We're going to keep moving through that. So this is just the beginning of people learning how to do that. And we're going to do it also in Final Cut. Go ahead, Jason.
I would say straight away that there is no better way to learn video scopes. So like, here's a looped video, right? And that's just my program output and how the RGB parade is doing its thing, and it's just on a loop. Best way to learn scopes is to not start with like this means this and that means that. If you're already an audio guy, you have the right mind for it. Simply observe them, and you can do this live in DaVinci Resolve. Absolutely, you don't need to spend any money for a hardware set one of these, and it will just give you a much better sense of where to start.
Next question.
Roberta Barrow of Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania says, I bought Audio Hijack and Loopback. Audio Hijack works well. However, what's the use case for Loopback? Probably a basic question.
Yeah.
Not a basic question.
Go ahead, Michael, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, so Loopback lets you route audio from one application to any one or more number of outputs. And the really cool thing about Loopback, well, I don't know, one of the really cool things is that it lets you set up profiles. So you could say right now, I'm in a Zoom call. These 3 applications go to Zoom. This application's feed goes to my headphones. And then you could create another profile for, another scenario. And then beyond that, you can switch up on your Mac. It shows up as both an audio input source or an output source. And others can share more cool things.
Yep. Go ahead, George. Oh, Roscoe. I'm sorry, Roscoe.
No, that's okay. No, Michael nailed it. But yeah, and virtual, the idea of virtual machines, and then mix -1. If you want to mix -1, Loopback is probably the best way to do it.
Yep. Good. George, and then Bill. You're muted, George, somewhere.
It's not the Zoom mute.
Nope. Go ahead, Bill, and then Jason.
That thing I explained earlier where I'm going to be doing a screen scrape using QuickTime of a show that somebody wants me to edit later. So I'm using QuickTime Pro to just capture the screen, but I also need audio, and I don't want to just send the audio that's coming through that Zoom meeting and have it go out my speaker and not do anything with it. So in Loopback, I can set 1 or more MP3 recorders that are just virtual, live in Loopback, and it's going to write all that audio to the drive as one thing. And then I can also send it out to an external device like the Zoom little handy recorder through an XLR cable. So it does patch audio into multiple things that originates inside a computer. One of the most handy tools I've run into.
Good, Jason.
I'm going to start a fire when everybody gets an ATEM Extreme and realizes that they don't have program return with mix minus. That Loopback will be your savior. So let's say you've got Skype and, I don't know, Zoom on one computer, and you don't quite know, you've got a video card, but how am I going to not return and loop Skype back to Skype and Zoom back to Zoom, because I want full quality, so I don't want to be doing echo cancellation in the app? Loopback is your way to do it.
Good. Michael, looks like you have something to show us.
This is not anything necessarily fancy, but this is just Loopback that I have open. I'm not running it right now. But yeah, you can route to multiple things. One of the things that I really do like about Loopback is that if you set stuff up with devices on, it remembers those settings, so you can control them a lot. Like I have a DeckLink card, which I don't actually do anything with the audio output, but like it gives you per channel control, which can be useful. The other thing that I would mention though is if you are running Loopback, because it is a different interface, you should probably make sure to double test things like screen sharing functions in Zoom and capturing audio, because it will mess with your defaults, which caught me unexpectedly once or twice when I was not necessarily prepared to introduce the complexity. But it's another really useful thing. Oh yeah, and then volume control is something I use pretty frequently if I am mixing multiple audio sources, because you have a per app volume control on macOS, which you wouldn't get otherwise.
Go ahead, George.
So I bring all my vMix sources into Loopback on my Mac so I could monitor sources in one place. And if you're using audio hijack, like just happened to me, I'm generally have my stuff set up for office hours from 6 a.m. in the morning to 10 at night. So it just shut itself down. So if you're going to use it, don't put it on a timer like obviously I'm here, but it shuts. That's what you couldn't hear my audio, because audio hijack just times out after about 16 hours.
Very good. Next question.
Patrick Shonis is back again from Little Rock, Arkansas I know Alex briefly mentioned SMPTE 2110 a few times, but can he tell us more? What is making 2110 the high-end industry standard?
Well, I think that we all know that what we want to do is get to a point where we're not moving dedicated copper around, whether it's SDI or fiber or whatever. We all know that we just like to, get to an IP standard that we can use. And the most people most people in heavy iron production don't consider NDI to be something they want to lean their entire facility on. In smaller productions, it definitely is used, and you can patch a lot of stuff together. But the standards are, standards take a long time, and New Tech got impatient. They were like, hey, let's get this done right now. But some of the routing protocols and so on and so forth are a little bit more mature in 2110. So if you're going to build an entire facility on it, most of the larger facilities that we're seeing are going to be based on that. The reality is that it's just a little behind in the sense that there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't support it yet. so you get things in and out. How do you get it out? How do you get it in? Once it's in that network, it's really powerful. Now you do need big switches. It's not like you can go out and get a Netgear and make that your 2110 switch or router. You need to. They're big switches because they're moving a lot of data. And so 2110 is going to make things a lot easier over the next decade. By the time we get to the 2030, we'll look back on the quaint days, like we look at analog video. We used to have RGB connections and everything else. It'll look the same way. I mean, we're not going to stay with SDI forever, but we're kind of in that really uncomfortable position right now between everything where nothing really works. Like nothing that really works perfectly. And it's frustrating because I just put in, I have a bunch of routers and 72 by 72 and some 40 by 40s and you just have all this copper that you're moving around, and that it's going to go away at some point. But I will say that we have a bunch of patches. So we patch all out to, these bit tree, 12G that have pins in all of them. And I will say for stuff that is mission critical, it's really nice to know that you've got a mechanical pin that moves signal either in or out or reroutes it, or, that part of it. I think it's going to take a little while for us to, do it. Now, I will say that our facility is also completely based on Dante. like the idea of doing what I know that it's going to go away. Like we're going to stop doing this because in Dante, the idea of running, we ran some, in the early days of the new facility, we ran a little bit of analog just to make sure that if anything went wrong with the Dante network, that we could go back to it or something. But the analog turned out to be so much of a mess that we kind of gave that up. So we're, audio has already gotten there. Like audio has sorted that part out. But video is still kind of on its way. And there's a lot of people that are really successful with NDI, and we use, as we continue to do more testing in the cloud, we're using more and more NDI in the cloud, which will be still what is used there. But we've had enough glitches with NDI that we're kind of like, I don't know if I want to lean all the way in. Like most of us have been bitten bad enough in a couple places by NDI that we're just, little, we tense up a little bit when it gets close. Go ahead, John.
Well, how long will we be this awkward teenager? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
10
years.
10 years. Okay.
Yeah. We're going through a 10 years period. It'll get better. Our voice will get deeper in the next 2 or 3 years. And then, we'll actually be able to grow a beard by 2026, that kind of stuff. So but I think that it's going to take a while. And part of it is just so much infrastructure to change. We're in what's making it worse in a lot of ways is that the big iron that's paying for all of that, or that would pay for it, that market is getting smaller. So the market is shrinking. So the broadcast market is in this thing where they're on a ship that's kind of going, turning like the Titanic. So they have this problem where the investment that we would normally have in that space isn't happening. So there's not the big money to just go, okay, we're going to turn everything into this, because they don't have that. And then all this, what we're doing is growing really, really fast.
But it's all uncompressed, and we're not going to be 8K. We're going to be 12K. Isn't there a certain point that you don't catch up?
I don't think we're going to transport more than 8K. I think that the Blackmagic has a 12K camera, and but it doesn't even output. I think it doesn't output beyond 4K out of the camera, and I don't see any, you just run out of useful pixels. Like the 12K is great for oversampling. It's great for pan and scan. It's great there's a bunch of things that 12K is cool. And it's great because your camera is higher resolution than everybody else's. I mean, but I think that, 8K is as many pixels as you need for most things. Like so much. I would say that there are things like big displays across giant LEDs that are 40 feet wide and 20 feet high. 12K is kind of cool. You could, that's a really useful frame for that. But the question is there enough application for that in a world that may not have that kind of physical event maybe ever again. Like so like is that that size of a physical event is going to make less and less sense. So I think that the 12K thing is a little bit complicated, but I think I have done a fair bit of work where I've gotten to sit in front of a giant screen with 8K 120 frame per second HDR, and it's mind numbing. Like it's just like literally your brain stops viewing it it doesn't need to be 3D. It just feels 3D when you look at it, and your brain stops thinking that, like, if you move the camera, this is when I knew 8K 120 frame per second HDR was a thing, is when the camera moved, my stomach pulled in. Like, and and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I mean, I've had that sensation, but only with VR and other things like that. I haven't had that sensation with just a flat panel that I'm looking at. And but when it passed my periphery, when all I saw was that, my brain wasn't separating it from reality.
So
and
my
that
problem is that in 10 years my eyesight will be 720.
Exactly. I think my eyesight is like 1024 or something. It's not really 1920 by 1080 anymore. Anyway, next question.
The seventh scroll, who actually fesses up at the bottom of the question, it's Mike from Brooklyn. Hi, Mike. Says QLab, vMix, OBS, Ecamm, which is the best platform to live stream from a Mac, and add Memo Live in there as well?
Well, QLab isn't really a streaming thing. It's a playout system. I wouldn't call it I wouldn't consider it kind of the same thing as the other ones. Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to give an answer in the honor of Mickey. It depends. It just depends on what you're trying to do. I would argue that straight away the very best way to encode a stream is with a dedicated hardware streamer that is very inexpensive these days. The new web presenter is $500. That is less than a PC that could do anything near as smoothly. That said, they're just not, they're not built for it.
To do a separation, to separate those into little pieces, QLab is not really that. vMix doesn't run on a Mac. OBS is not stable on a Mac. So you're really talking about Ecamm versus Memo Live, in my opinion, of the ones that you brought up there. And I wouldn't recommend Wirecast on the Mac either. So on the Mac side, Ecamm is a lot easier to use. It's going to be a faster startup. It's going to be less expensive. It's going to do a lot of things that most people need. Memo Live is by far more powerful. So it's going to be able to do a lot more than Ecamm. So you just have to decide whether you're ready to invest in that and to move that forward or not. So but I think between those two, it's not, again, it depends. But for something fast and easy and relatively inexpensive, I would look at Ecamm. For something that is going to be more robust, when I do a software from my Mac, I use Memo to do that. And it took them like a decade to get me.
Took Oliver a long time.
Oliver, every time he saw me, he's like, it was a complete green eggs and ham.
We had like,
I was like, I do not like green eggs and ham, and then I was like, I like green eggs and ham. So anyway, but it took
to Twit. He showed up at Twit
over.
That time.
No, he showed up at Twit a couple times. Like that wasn't the first time he was there. He showed up a lot, and I was like, I don't understand the interface. I just was like, no. And then finally I kind of got over the hump, and then I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. It's a nice little, and all the little bits and pieces that it does, I do like now, but I was a curmudgeon for years. So, but I think it's probably the best as far as a Mac editing software for live editing on the Mac. It's the one I prefer. Next question.
Stan Chan in Roseville, I believe.
No, I think you skipped Roscoe for Sherman.
Gosh, I thought it was okay. It was up there. Sherman, just weeks into Zoom OSC on Universe after office hours stormed the castle. What impresses you most so far, and what do you most look forward to long term?
Well, Universe for years has just always impressed me how open and quick they are to accepting feedback and adding new features. I mean, it was crazy. Like, they blew me and Andy away within 3 days of saying, hey, can you add this? They all of a sudden added all this feedback that was way above what we actually requested as far as an actual integration. So really excited to see what comes out of the pipeline. I know Andy is talking to them about some more integrations with Room and Zoom ISO that may be coming out of the gate there. We're going to finish this one and then move on to the next one. So really excited to see where that all grows. And I would suggest to anybody else that has their own use case of using Universe, talk to the developers and see if you need something added.
The thing that makes me usually feel better when you see someone add something that's relatively stable and it's added really quickly, it means that the underlying architecture that they built it on is fairly modern and fairly well organized. Like that's what allows them to do that. It means that however they thought it out. I'm not surprised that Germans would think this out, and kind of my guess is on how fast they did it, and it's stable. Like when it comes out and it's stable, not like just blowing up all the time. It usually means that they thought through how they were going to add things, and so they're building into an architecture that's relatively straightforward. So
yeah, and there some other softwares are open source and makes it where lots of people can add in here. But the thing I really like about Universe is it's very concise and specific engineering that goes into how they implement things and making it so that it's just a simple drop-down interface to program. It's not code. You're removing that code aspect from a lot of it. And they really have done great with all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Okay, now we get it to Stan Chan in Roseville, who says, what is unique about the Hopin platform that's making it grow to be a $5.65 billion company in such a short time?
I think that it's a relatively simple interface to work with. I mean, I think that's it lets people build events that are pretty straightforward to build, pretty straightforward to use. So if you're trying to replicate the live event space, I think that Hopin does that fairly easily and fairly seamlessly, probably more so than everyone else. And it just got ahead. It's not that it's the only event platform out there, but it got out ahead. It was already pretty mature when COVID started. And so you had companies that had their own video platforms that didn't have the way to manage people coming in and moving and going out and how they get back and forth. And I'm still a little unsure of whether we're really going to keep going down that same old platform of how we meet and how we go into rooms and how we do all the things that it does. So I'm not sure that that's a long-term solution, but if you're looking for that long-term solution, especially when you have a bunch of event organizers that only know one way, then Hopin fits in pretty effectively. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, with regards to the specifically large number, that there's much more than timing beyond that. But the other thing is they recently also acquired StreamYard, and I don't know the order between raising money, valuation, acquisition, but they seem to have plans for growing the company as a whole. And when you're upfront with investors about your plans to do those things, and they believe you can, they usually give you some forward-looking growth on that factor too.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think that if COVID starts, we have new variants, spinning around right now in Oregon and other places. So if things come back to some semblance, I still think that we're probably, I still think for any kind of large events, that affect us. It's not that people will start going to restaurants and they'll start going out and everything else, but large events are probably still 2022, maybe fall of 2021. But really, like the big events that we remember of 100,000 people, like I think that, like I'd be pretty surprised if I saw CES go back to normal in January. Like that's probably early. It could. I don't think I would go because it seems like it would be a massive super spreader. But it was before. The funny thing is that we all got the flu after the CES a lot. We got sick after CES before. So it's been a
CES
super spreader.
hickeys, it was a thing.
Yeah, like it's like
They're
you bring a whole bunch
in person.
Sorry,
I was saying they're planning for in person.
I know. Like I just think it's a horrible idea. So but the thing is that as what we're doing here with Zoom OSC, with Universe, I still feel like for instance, Zoom makes a handful of, Zoom has just so much infrastructure. It just has to add a couple things, and suddenly Hopin becomes not nearly as interesting. You know, like that's the scary part. If Zoom can do that, I don't know if they have the focus. You know, they just have so many people wanting to do so many different things. But if they build that in, it becomes much more complicated really quickly for a company like Hopin. Also, I really feel like we want to keep watching the space of and we talked about this last week because I think it's so important, is that I really think the digital first events are going to become massive, and they're not going to Hopin. I don't know. Maybe with StreamYard and everything else, maybe they can leverage that. But those digital first events, I think, are going to feel a lot different than the old events and what they're doing. And that's going to be I don't think anybody has that infrastructure built yet to make those things work. So I think it's going to be may you live in interesting times. Well, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting for a little while too. Next 2 or 3 years. Next question.
Tony Mobley, our friend in the panel from Newman, Georgia, says, so now I have to buy a Stream Deck, a Windows machine, to run vMix, Zoom OSC, and Universal. What else is needed to do quality production? AWS?
We are not the right standard for like the bare minimum. Okay.
I mean, what I will say is that it just depends on the kind of show you're trying to put together. I think that the ATEM Mini by itself, this little guy here can do a lot of show. I think that there's always a danger of trying to buy too far into the future. And if you're not doing really great shows with something like this, then I would stick with that. Get good at that, and then look at, for me, usually what happens is I have to pay this off and pay off the next purchase before I'm buying it. I don't usually buy ahead of my revenue. So that's kind of the thing that I would strongly consider. Go ahead, George, and then Michael, and then TJ.
So what I've been saying to folks in the past couple of days, like for me personally, I had a big show a couple of weeks ago, but that big show, 90% of that show happened on rentals. I mean, if you have a real good partnership with a rental company, you can make your shows happen large and small. If you're working out of the house, again, you don't need to have 16 laptops coming into vMix. If you book a show that needs to handle that, rent those laptops. Don't go out and spend that money on that. Right now, don't go spend $6,000 on a PC. Spin up a couple of machines in AWS and practice on those if you're just getting into it. I would go to AWS and learn vMix or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish without spending all that money.
And remember that we are going to do literally Hello World this Friday in AWS. So it's literally going to be like, here's how we set up the account. Here's how we look at it. It's going to be, and then I'm planning 4 Fridays in a row where we just talk about building up AWS and thinking through it. So the idea is to get a lot of us up to speed with how we actually implement those things in the cloud, because I think it's that important that we kind of figure it out. Go ahead, Doug, and then TJ, and then John.
So believe it or not, I started out with 1 camera, 1 light kit, and 1 computer. You just do your projects and work your magic, do what you love to do, and just build on it. 10 years it took to get to this, but I might have taken a loan out or 2, but and I like toys like anybody else, but you don't have to get everything that everybody says. You work what you got, because really it's not the equipment, it's the talent behind the equipment that really drives what you're doing. And you can do amazing things with this guy right here, this little iPhone. So that's just my advice.
I mean, I had a friend of mine is a character designer for has been a character designer for Star Wars, and one of the things that he would often say is, if any artist around me complains about their pencil, I know they're not very good. like that they couldn't do a good picture because he can just sit down and do whatever, and photographers will often talk about that. People will talk about what kind of camera did you like, they'll say that's a beautiful image, what camera did you use, and they're kind of like, not about the camera, and so it is important. We talk about tools here a lot, but we always want to back up into what's going to make a difference is thinking about how you're going to start the show and what makes it worth watching live, and what kind of interaction are you going to do. And sure, you absolutely need to have those things, but it can be we are a dangerous crew because we do talk a lot about gear, and it does matter. But when you're starting to ski, for instance, the skis don't matter that much. When you get really good at skiing, then you start wanting a specific kind. TJ, and then Michael, and then Tony.
Keep in mind that the ATEM Mini Pro can actually do a really nice job of streaming itself. Yesterday, Victor did his whole sax jam through the ATEM Mini Pro, and it did the actual streaming to YouTube through that. It looked good and sounded great.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I think this argument plays out in every single domain, whether it's production, photography. I talk about the same thing with software engineers and pulling in tools to their own engineering projects. Yeah, and the way that I think about this is, I think George is right. If you have the ability to rent, do that, and I will rent gear since I'm not going to buy every lens I want to try. But I also, the other way I think about this is start with a problem and a vision. If I want to execute something, what do I need to get there to execute that vision? And sometimes that means buying things, and sometimes that means you buy things for a vision that doesn't work out, and then you have to figure out what to do. But often that's where renting comes in, or borrowing things. The other thing I would say is, in the case of AWS, the way that I think software and a lot of this is really cool is that learning about AWS gives you the ability to try a different kind of experience in a more flexible way. And you have the challenges between software and hardware, but moving things to software gives you flexibility that you wouldn't have elsewhere. And so I think there's something to learn there and to play with. Whether you need it, that depends on what you're trying to do. But there is something really powerful there.
Yep. Go ahead, Jason.
I want to emphasize again, the studios that you see, mine isn't tiny, but it's not huge. Like, this is the room that I'm in right now. Stuff like that is not built in a minute. It is the result of a whole bunch of really specific problems. And you start with the big stuff, and then you go down to the little stuff, and more and more and more and more. Nobody wants this much gear. Trust me.
I only buy gear that I need for that job. Like, that's how I buy gear. I need another camera. I need another thing, and I'll rent it if I think that I'm not going to use it. I don't know how often I'm going to use it, and I buy it if I think I'm going to use it a lot. But I'm very agile in that sense that I don't, I have ideas, and we want to learn and know what's possible. We want to know that universe is out there, but we don't need to buy it immediately. We can, especially when we know that we have Sherman. We can hire Sherman for that job and just have him do it. Go ahead, John Idelson, and then Tony. Sorry, I skipped over John a couple of times.
Not a problem. I was just going to say, we've been very good in the office hours. Remember what we did with microphones. We know there's $800 microphones, but we know there's a $20 microphone that gets us 90% of the way. So, and on this Saturday, a group of us are going to be building from an Apple Pi playout device. It will be $109 versus $600. And not only will it be cheaper, but we'll also figure out how to get IP addresses into it. So it will be knowledge, which was priceless.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sign up 12 noon next Saturday.
Yep. Yeah. This 12. Yeah, that's something that's going out in the announcement tomorrow. It's 12 o'clock on Saturday Pacific Standard Time. We're going to build a Raspberry. A bunch of us have, these little Raspberry Pis that we all ordered because we were excited about what Jonas was doing, and then a bunch of us realized we haven't done this before. So we are going to get these guys running and get them started up, and I think that that's going to be a lot of fun. So we're all gonna. Ooh, what are you showing there? And then we'll come to you, Tony. What is that?
It's just a Smarty Pi touchscreen case for the Raspberry Pi.
I got so annoyed by those that I returned mine. I must have had a bad one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks cool.
I mean, it's not great, but it just goes into the display and 7-inch
That's cool.
touchscreen.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the reason I asked the question was in part in humor. But the other side of it is that when you get to see all of these amazing things that different video production specialists are doing, it's extremely exciting, and it's motivating. And I hear everybody loud and clear that, you know, you really need to make your work pay for your upgrades and the things that you want to do in the future. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. But again, thank you so much for even just entertaining it. But it is really,
It's a fair
really
point.
exciting.
Like, really.
It's really exciting to see these amazing things, Zoom OSC and Universe and vMix, and you know, it's always something to learn. It's always something new. It's exciting, and that was in part the reason why I asked the question, because it's
one of the things that I think is really important is that and we did this to some degree in Pixel Core, but we're actually doing it much more effectively here, is that we do have we're intermingling the energy from folks that are just getting into this and learning it and getting excited about it with the experience of some folks that really have a lot of, that have a lot of background. And I think that, that heterogeneous mix doesn't happen very often. And so a lot of us that have a lot of experience can get really jaded. Like we're just kind of like, ugh, like that. And we can sit around having coffee, complaining about our clients or complaining about some crazy thing that we have to do or whatever. And we just forget how amazing what we get to do is, and I think that gets brought back to us all the time when we're talking about this stuff and we're contributing to other people learning how to do it. And so I think that there's this energy that we get from folks that are not in the same place that some of us are. And what's cool is that there are so many different professionals with different backgrounds in this group that I'm learning something. I have a lot of experience in a lot of different places, but I'm learning something every single day from everyone here of there's something new that person has. And so I'm able to have this wisdom of all these things that I don't, like I've had people build Raspberry Pi stuff. I haven't done it. So Saturday is a new thing for me. I know what the Raspberry Pi does mostly because Kevin Hansen on my team, like, go make this work. I know that it does the thing. Just go make it do the thing. Now I'm going to do the thing, with all of you. And so we're all learning from each other. We're all beginners in one place and experts in others. And I think that the mixture of the expertise and the energy is something you just don't see in many places. You just get a bunch of people that are experts, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to try the new thing and they're not going to do something new. That there's things that different people do here that I wouldn't do, but then I see them do it and I'm like, okay, well that might actually work. And so, I might have to give that up. But it's easy for experts to get into a rut that they all agree on something and then they don't try the new thing. And so I think that as this group grows, if we are able to keep it together and keep doing what we're doing, we end up with this really rich, heterogeneous mix of people of expertise and energy and background that allows us to keep growing faster and faster. Go ahead, TJ, and then Michael, and then Sherman, and then we'll come back to that. We'll see. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's important to not get too caught up in the gear acquisition syndrome, because we are all tech heads at heart and we really enjoy the technology and playing with this stuff. But using your tools until you find their limitation and then saying, oh, I cannot do anything anymore because my tools are limiting my ability to do something, then it's really time to start exploring what other tools out there. A new saw isn't going to necessarily make me a better carpenter, but if the saw I have is limiting me, then getting a new saw will enable me to do more that way.
And I think that one of the things is that by being around a group that is doing really big shows, you get to know that those other saws exist. A lot of times you'll be sitting there just going, like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. And then someone goes, there's one that just does the thing, but a lot of us don't know that, like I didn't know that Universe existed until like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Like I just didn't know, it didn't even occur. Like I had a link like, oh, that's really cool, and so, and there's a lot of things like that every day for me that things just show up and I'm like, oh, okay, because last time I talked to Sherman, he was using Ventus, like I was like completely different world. Anyway, Michael and then Sherman.
Yeah. I mean, I think the excitement part is really important. And the two ways that I think about this are on any project. If I want to try something new, I have some plan for damage control. And so I know what's new, how to test that and put into place and how to have a backup if it fails. The other thing, and this is true of gear, this is not always the best philosophy. So if any significant others are listening, they can hit the mute switch for about 30 seconds. But since I make no money on this, I always know, like what I'm putting or what I'm spending money on from a pure financial perspective is, a fun hobby budget. And I account for that as well. And I think in any system, like my primary income is teaching, and no one cares if I have an A10 mini or a hyperdeck or not. But like in the middle of a pandemic, spending a little bit of money makes it fun to try new things and makes it easier to keep going as well. And so, I think that as long as you're responsible about it and know what you're budgeting for, use gear as a motivation is, I think, fine too, as long as you're aware.
I mean, a lot of people have other hobbies that cost a lot of money. They might be buying boat, like their little boat that they take out over the weekend, or the souped up car, or there's a lot, or too many sous vides in my case. But the all those things are things. This is just our hobby, and it can be an expensive hobby. It doesn't have to be, but I think that it's probably more productive than most other hobbies that suck up capital. Go ahead, Sherman, and then John.
Yeah, I was just going to expand on as you're looking to purchase things, reach out to this group and other groups and find what the free comparables are. You don't need to buy Photoshop. Go use paint.net, GIMP, XY. Like there's a dozen other free ones out there. Don't go buy Universe. Well, buy Universe. It's awesome. But go use Companion first. Go use Companion first.
Right.
Learn it, figure
Right.
it out. It's free. There's so much in there that you can get. And just because you learned that software and maybe spent 2 weeks, 3 years on it, it's going to give you background knowledge for that next piece of software you move to.
Right. No, absolutely. Go ahead, John, and then Jason.
I was just going to say that, Michael, you and I should talk offline. As a professor, I wrote grants, and everyone said, you love the research. I said, no, I love to be able to afford the tools that my wife won't let me buy. So, and there's lots of research out there on effective teaching, and this would be a good time to write that proposal.
And and there's a lot of things that if it's not costing a lot of money, that I use a lot of available equipment that I have around to fiddle. Like my and I like for a while the array that I'm now rebuilding inside of a mini Extreme or whatever, that was $250,000 of hardware, but it was hardware that I had at the time I had a company that stuff was just laying around. So it was like, well, it can sit in the warehouse, or I can put a whole bunch of screens up. And so I was experimenting, and now at my house, I'm experimenting with much smaller versions of that. And the good news is it has never been so inexpensive to do this. Like those of us who've been doing this, it is like, I've been playing around with this Extreme, and I just keep thinking to myself, I cannot believe that this is what it is, so there's never been that I can do what I can do sitting in my office, just is stunning. So those are, it's never been a better time to get into this. When we got into it, a switcher that could do 8 inputs was like $26,000. Like that was, what was it? The Panasonic HS450 or something like that was like $26,000. And that was about starting for a solid eight channel switcher. John, and then Jason. John,
Original Sony half-inch Sony black and white Portapack, 15K.
Yeah.
What would you do with that now?
I have a 1080p camera still in my garage that was $250,000 when it came out. John Puett, and then Jason.
Yeah, Michael said a lot of what I was going to cover, and that is, I'm not here I'm not going to do production. That's not why I'm here. Right. I'm here because I like the challenge. I like to learn. I think I can contribute to the panel and what, occasionally with my perspective. Tony, you're great. You're an inspiration to me. Watching your setup grow has really been motivation to make me do what I do. We've all got different limitations. We've all got different skills. I am on what we call our culture action team, which means there's a small chance that some of what I learn here might be applicable elsewhere. But my job is stopping the bad guys. It's stopping the attackers. And it has nothing to do with what we talk about here, except for what we're going to cover Friday. So,
and I'm going to I'm gonna have to pull us back into the move forward because I have a hard out and I have a family hard out at 8:00. So I'll get into a lot of trouble. Next question. Great
Stan Chan,
answers.
Roseville, can the SMPTE 2110 standard be implemented in a cloud service like AWS?
I don't think currently. So one of the things I'm going to try to do is get. I actually know some folks over at SMPTE, and I think that what will be fun is to get an hour where we get the actual folks from SMPTE to come on and talk about it. So stand by. We'll let me see if I can pull someone in for an hour to talk about 2110 specifically. Next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana has our last question of the night for the Raspberry Pi Build-a-thon. What cases did you decide upon? Argon 1 M2 case for Raspberry Pi 4 gives you a M2 and a full-sized HDMI and a decent cooling system, but I build out my playout B and D caffeine instances into one. I'm sorry, I'm not parsing that last little bit, but
I think we're going to recommend a Cana kit. Is the one we're sending out. I think that's what I think John has there. And so I think that Guy, I just told, the Cana kit. Guy, I just told Guy to send me a link to what we should buy, like just what should we buy out? And so I think he sent me over a link of stuff that the Cana kit is kind of all in one. It has all the cables and wires and heat sinks and everything else that you need. Go ahead, John.
It has everything you need, $109 on Amazon. And if you want to put it in a fancier case, it just pops in and pops out. I looked at the other case, so I have case envy, but I'm going to stick with this for the weekend.
Yeah. So, and again, this is just a little like if you want to play with it. The goal with everything that we're doing in this area where we do it all together is we get to learn it all together. It's kind of a bonding moment, but it also means that now there's a whole bunch of us that know how to do it. So that if you don't do it on Saturday, if you don't buy it for Saturday, the good news is there'll be, I don't know, 20 or 30 people that have now done it from scratch, and they can still remember what it was like to not. The hard part you get into with experts is it's hard to know. Like they don't know what to tell you, and then they get impatient that you can't figure out why that but we'll still remember that. So we'll be like, no, I got stuck there too. You can still remember what that was. So anyway, a lot of fun. Thanks to everybody for coming and hanging out. It's I think the Saturday it's a different pace, and I think we're having fun with the Monday nights. We're back tomorrow talking about Clubhouse. Remember, Wednesday night is the Clubhouse night, so 7 to 8 is Clubhouse, where we actually do Clubhouse here. The real, we actually use it as opposed to just streaming into it. And it's going to be a fun week. And remember that Resolve starts back up tomorrow on Saturday morning. So if you bought Resolve and you got the training, and we're going to the edit page, so go through that training, write down questions, and we'll see you on Saturday or tomorrow or Wednesday. Every day there's an opportunity. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow.